I was sitting at my desk in downtown Phoenix when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. A man's voice, urgent and professional, asked if I was Terry Morrison. When I said yes, he identified himself as Ranger Davis from the Arizona State Parks Department. My 16-year-old daughter Emma had been found dehydrated and delirious in the Sonoran Desert, 20 miles outside of town. The temperature was 115 degrees. She had no water. He asked who had left her there. My blood turned to ice. Emma was supposed to be on a harmless family day trip with my parents and sister. I dropped everything and raced to the hospital, my mind spinning with confusion and terror. The drive to Banner University Medical Center took 20 minutes, but it felt like 20 hours. I kept calling Emma's phone. Nothing. I tried my mother Carol's number, straight to voicemail. My sister Diane's phone rang and rang with no answer. My father George didn't pick up either. Panic clawed at my throat as I weaved through traffic, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I burst through the emergency room doors, a nurse directed me to the 3rd floor. I ran down the hallway until I found Emma's room. She was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, her face bright red with sunburn. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked so small and fragile under the white hospital blanket. "Emma," I whispered, rushing to her side. I grabbed her hand and tears immediately filled my eyes. "Baby, what happened?" She started crying the moment she saw me. Her whole body shook with sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry? Honey, you have nothing to be sorry for." I stroked her hair, trying to comfort her while my heart hammered against my ribs. "Just tell me what happened." A doctor entered the room before Emma could answer. He introduced himself as Dr. Hassan and gestured for me to step into the hallway. I didn't want to leave Emma, but I needed to know what was going on. "Your daughter was brought in by emergency services about 2 hours ago," Dr. Hassan explained, his expression grave. She was severely dehydrated, suffering from moderate heat stroke, and had 2nd-degree sunburns on her face, arms, and legs. Her core body temperature was 104 degrees when she arrived. We've been working to cool her down and rehydrate her. Oh my God, my legs felt weak. Is she going to be okay? She'll recover, but she was very close to a medical crisis. Another hour in those conditions could have resulted in organ failure or death. He paused, his eyes searching mine. "Miss Morrison, can you tell me how your daughter ended up alone in the desert with no water in 115-degree heat?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice breaking. "She was with my parents and my sister. They were supposed to be hiking one of the easy trails near South Mountain. It was just supposed to be a few hours." Dr. Hassan nodded slowly. "I see. Well, when Emma is feeling up to it, I'm sure she can tell you more. For now, she needs rest and fluids. We're keeping her overnight for observation." I thanked him and went back into Emma's room. I pulled a chair close to her bed and held her hand. "Sweetheart, can you tell me what happened? Where are Grandma Carol and Grandpa George and Aunt Diane?" Emma's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mom, we were hiking, and it was so hot. I told Grandma I didn't feel good. I was dizzy and my head hurt. I asked if we could turn back." "Okay, that's completely reasonable," I said softly. "Then what?" "Grandma said I was being dramatic. She said I was spoiled and that I needed to toughen up." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Aunt Diane agreed with her. She called me weak and entitled. She said you raised me to be soft." Anger began to simmer in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. "Go on." I tried to keep going, but I really felt sick. So I sat down on a rock and told them I couldn't walk anymore. I said I needed water. Emma's hands trembled in mine. Grandma got really mad. She said I needed to learn a lesson about resilience and gratitude. She said I didn't appreciate anything. "What did they do, Emma?" My voice was barely steady. "They left me there, Mom." Emma's sobs grew louder. "They just walked back to the car and drove away. Aunt Diane said they'd come back in an hour after I learned to appreciate what I had. Grandpa didn't say anything. He just followed them. They took all the water. They took my phone. I had nothing. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach." "They left you there?" "On purpose." Emma nodded miserably. I waited and waited. I tried to find shade, but there wasn't much. I kept thinking they'd come back, but they didn't. I don't know how long I was there. Everything got fuzzy. Then the ranger found me. I pulled Emma into my arms, holding her as gently as I could while rage burned through every cell in my body. My own mother, my own sister, my own father. They had left my child to die in the desert. You're safe now. I whispered into Emma's hair. I promise you're safe. They will never do anything like this to you again. I stayed with Emma until she fell asleep, exhausted from the trauma and dehydration. Then I stepped into the hallway and started calling my family. Carol's phone went to voicemail again. I left a message, my voice shaking with fury. Mom, Emma is in the hospital. She almost died. Call me back immediately. I called Diane next. Same thing. Voicemail. Diane, I know what you did. Call me now. George didn't answer either. I left him a similar message. An hour passed. Then 2. Nothing. No calls. No texts. I sat in that uncomfortable hospital chair, staring at my phone, unable to comprehend how my own family could do something so cruel and then ignore me completely. Finally, at almost 8 o'clock at night, my phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Emma is fine. Stop being so dramatic. We were teaching her character. You've raised her too soft. I stared at those words until they blurred. No apology, no concern, no acknowledgement that they had endangered my daughter's life. Just blame. Blame directed at me for how I raised my child. I texted back. She almost died. The doctor said another hour and she could have had organ failure. What is wrong with you? Diane didn't respond. None of them did. I sat there in the dim hospital room, listening to Emma's steady breathing, and realized that the people who were supposed to love us most had just revealed who they truly were. Emma stayed in the hospital overnight. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter alone in that desert, scared and suffering while my family drove away. The nurses were kind and checked on Emma regularly. Her vitals stabilized through the night, and by morning, the doctor said she could go home as long as she continued to rest and drink plenty of fluids. I was helping Emma get dressed when I heard voices in the hallway. My mother's voice, sharp and defensive. My stomach dropped. Carol swept into the room, followed by George and Diane. All 3 of them looked perfectly put together, not a hair out of place. Carol was even wearing lipstick. They didn't look like people who had just traumatized a child. Well, Emma, I hope you've learned your lesson, Carol said briskly, walking over to the bed. All of this could have been avoided if you'd just pushed through and finished the hike. I stepped between Carol and Emma. Excuse me. Oh, Terry, don't start, Diane said, rolling her eyes. Emma is fine. She's being dramatic, just like always. Dramatic. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. She was in the hospital with heat stroke. The doctor said she almost died. Doctors always exaggerate, Carol said dismissively. We only left her for 20 minutes. She was in the shade. This is completely blown out of proportion. 20 minutes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The ranger found her hours after you left. She had no water, no phone, and no shade. It was 115 degrees. She's exaggerating, Diane insisted. We left her right near some rocks where there was plenty of shade. And it wasn't that long. Maybe 30 minutes at most. Emma made a small sound from behind me. I glanced back and saw tears streaming down her face again. She looked terrified. Emma? I said gently. Go wait in the hallway for a minute, okay? I need to talk to them. Emma grabbed her bag and practically ran out of the room. The moment she was gone, I turned back to my family. How dare you? How dare you come in here and lie like this? We're not lying. George finally spoke up. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but he was backing Carol up. Maybe Emma wandered off after we left. Maybe she wasn't where we left her. So now you're saying she got herself lost on purpose. I couldn't keep the disgust out of my voice. I'm saying your daughter has always been manipulative, Diane said coldly. She probably walked farther into the desert to make us look bad. And clearly, it worked. Here you are. Attacking us. Carol nodded vigorously. This is exactly the problem, Terry. You've raised Emma to be weak and spoiled. She can't handle the slightest discomfort without falling apart. When we were young, Our parents taught us resilience. They taught us to push through hard things. That's what we were trying to do for Emma, by abandoning her in the desert. My hands were shaking. We didn't abandon her, Carol snapped. We gave her space to think about her attitude. There's a difference. You left a child alone in 115-degree heat with no water. I was shouting now, and I didn't care who heard me. That's not teaching a lesson. That's child endangerment. Diane crossed her arms. This is what happens when you divorce a perfectly good man and decide to raise a child on your own. You've lost all perspective. You coddle Emma. You make her think the world revolves around her. We were trying to help. Help. I felt like I was going insane. You think almost killing her was helping? Oh, stop being so dramatic, Carol said sharply. This is exactly why we don't tell you things anymore, Terry. You always overreact. You've always been the problem child in this family, always thinking you know better than everyone else. You ran away from family values when you divorced Mark, and now look at the result. A weak, spoiled teenager who can't even finish a simple hike. I opened my mouth to respond, but a voice from the doorway cut me off. Miss Morrison, a nurse stood there, her expression carefully neutral. Can I speak with you for a moment? I followed her into the hallway, grateful for the interruption before I said something I couldn't take back. Emma was sitting in a chair nearby, her face pale. The nurse led me a little farther down the hall, out of earshot. I couldn't help but overhear some of that conversation, she said quietly. I just want you to know that if I were you, I would file a police report. What happened to your daughter wasn't discipline. It was criminal neglect. Her words hit me like a physical blow. A police report. Against my own family. I don't know if I can do that, I whispered. I understand it's complicated, the nurse said sympathetically. But your daughter deserves protection, and they don't seem remorseful at all. Before I could respond, Dr. Hassan appeared. He looked serious. Miss Morrison, I need to speak with you. It's important. He led me into a small consultation room and closed the door. I want you to know that I've filed a mandatory report with Child Protective Services. My heart stopped. What? Arizona law requires medical professionals to report suspected child abuse or neglect. Based on Emma's injuries and the circumstances she described, I had no choice. He paused. What happened to Emma wasn't an accident. The heat stroke she suffered was severe enough that another hour in those conditions could have caused permanent organ damage or death. Someone made a decision to leave her in a life-threatening situation. That's not discipline. That's criminal. I sank into a chair, my head spinning. CPS. A formal investigation. This was real. This was serious. I know this is difficult, Dr. Hassan said gently, but this is about protecting Emma. Do you understand? I nodded slowly. I did understand. But I also understood that my family was about to face real consequences, and knowing them, they would never forgive me for it. When I walked back into Emma's room, my family was still there. They had no idea what was coming. They were still talking among themselves, completely unconcerned. We're leaving, I said flatly. Emma needs to go home and rest. Fine, Carol said. But Terry, you need to think about your attitude. We're family. We were trying to help Emma grow. If you can't see that, then that's your problem. I didn't respond. I just took Emma's hand and walked out of that hospital room. As we left, I heard Diane mutter something about me being ungrateful. They had no idea that CPS was already opening a file. They had no idea that the doctor had documented everything. They had no idea that their perfect little world was about to come crashing down. And honestly, I was glad they didn't know. Let them be blindsided the way they'd blindsided Emma in that desert. The CPS investigation started within 3 days. A woman named Sandra Okoye called me and scheduled a home visit. She was professional and kind, but I could see the concern in her eyes when she interviewed Emma. Emma told her everything, the whole story. Sandra took notes and asked gentle but thorough questions. You'll need to interview your mother, father, and sister as well, Sandra told me before she left. I'll be in touch. I knew that the moment Sandra contacted my family, everything would explode. I was right. Carol called me 2 days later, absolutely livid. How dare you bring CPS into this family? How dare you try to destroy us over a simple misunderstanding? Mom, it wasn't a misunderstanding. You left Emma in the desert. She almost died. She did not almost die. Stop being so dramatic. Carol's voice was venomous. I've already called your Aunt Helen, your Aunt Linda, your Uncle Paul, and everyone at church. They all know what you're doing. They all know you're trying to tear this family apart because you've always been jealous of Diane and me. Jealous. I couldn't believe this. Mom, this isn't about jealousy. This is about protecting Emma. Emma doesn't need protection from us. She needs protection from you. You're poisoning her against her own family. Carol hung up before I could respond. Within hours, my phone started blowing up. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Most of them were angry, accusatory, mean. My cousin Brian texted, "Can't believe you'd do this to Aunt Carol. She's been crying for 2 days. You should be ashamed." My Aunt Helen called and left a voicemail. "Terry, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're going to regret this. Family is everything. You don't betray blood." My Uncle Paul sent a long text about how Carol had always been there for me, how Shed supported me through my divorce, and how I was repaying her kindness with cruelty. Even people from my mother's church started reaching out. Some were more subtle, saying they were praying for me and hoping I'd find my way back to forgiveness. Others were blunt, calling me vindictive and ungrateful. Diane took to social media. She posted a long, carefully worded message about cancel culture and how people can't discipline children anymore without being attacked. She didn't mention names, but anyone who knew our family knew exactly what she was talking about. The post got hundreds of likes and supportive comments. "Stay strong," someone wrote. "These kids today are so soft. You're a great aunt," another person commented. "Don't let the haters win." Emma saw the posts. She came to me in tears. "Mom, is this all my fault? Is Grandma right? Am I tearing the family apart?" I pulled her into a tight hug. "No, baby. None of this is your fault. What happened to you was wrong. I'm protecting you. That's what mothers do." But inside, I was crumbling. The rejection from my family hurt more than I wanted to admit. These were people I'd grown up with, people I'd loved, and they were all turning against me because I refused to let them sweep this under the rug. My best friend Jade was furious on my behalf. "They're gaslighting you," she said when I called her crying. "They're trying to make you doubt yourself so you'll back down. Don't let them." My ex-husband Mark called too. We'd been divorced for 5 years and usually kept our interactions brief and civil. But when he heard what had happened to Emma, he was horrified. "Terry, I'm so sorry," he said. "I never liked how your mother treated you, but I had no idea she'd do something like this to Emma. If you need anything, I'm here. Money for a lawyer, a witness statement, whatever you need." His support meant more than he knew. At least someone believed me. At least someone could see how wrong this was. But the isolation from my family of origin was crushing. Every day brought new messages, new attacks, new accusations. My mother called mutual friends and painted me as a vindictive daughter who was using her granddaughter as a weapon. Diane continued to post vague social media messages about false accusations and family betrayal. I started doubting myself. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe Emma had exaggerated. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I should just drop the whole thing and try to repair the relationships. But then I'd look at Emma, still recovering from sunburns, still jumpy and anxious, still having nightmares about the desert. And I'd remember what Dr. Hassan said. Another hour and she could have died. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was protecting my child, even if it cost me everything. Then, 2 weeks after the CPS investigation started, I received a thick envelope in the mail. It was from a law firm. Inside was a letter from an attorney my parents had hired. The letter threatened to sue me for defamation. It demanded that I drop any police complaints and cease all cooperation with CPS. It accused me of making false allegations against my family in order to damage their reputations. But the worst part was at the end. The letter stated that if I continued with the investigation, my parents would seek grandparent visitation rights. They would argue in court that I was an unfit mother who was using Emma as a pawn in a family dispute. They would fight for custody. I read that letter 3 times, my hands shaking more with each pass. They were threatening to take Emma away from me. They were actually threatening to take my daughter. This wasn't just about defending their actions anymore. This was war. And my parents had just made it clear they would do anything, say anything, destroy anyone, to avoid taking responsibility for what they'd done. I called Mark immediately. "I need a lawyer," I said, my voice breaking. "I need the best family lawyer you know." "I'll make some calls," Mark promised. "Terry, they're not going to take Emma. I won't let that happen." I sat on my couch that night, staring at the letter, and realized something important. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to be the good daughter, trying to keep the peace. And where had it gotten me? Here, threatened and attacked by the very people who were supposed to love me most. No more. I was done trying to make them happy. From now on, my only priority was Emma. And if protecting her meant losing my entire family of origin, so be it. They wanted a war? They were going to get one. Sandra from CPS came back for a second interview. This time, she sat down with me privately after speaking with Emma again. "I need to ask you some questions about your own childhood," Sandra said gently. "Is that okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure where this was going. "Did your mother use physical discipline when you were growing up?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "She believed in strict parenting, spanking mostly. Sometimes she'd make me stand in the corner for hours. Once she locked me in my room for a whole day because I talked back to her." Sandra wrote something down. "Did she ever withhold food as punishment?" The question triggered a memory I'd buried for years. I was maybe 10 years old. I'd gotten a bad grade on a spelling test. Carol had been so angry. She'd sent me to bed without dinner. But it hadn't just been that one night. She'd done it for 3 days. 3 days of only water and crackers while the rest of the family ate normal meals. "Yes," I whispered. "Sometimes. Did she ever leave you outside as punishment?" Another memory surfaced. I was 12. I'd come home late from a friend's house. Carol had locked me out of the house for the entire night. I'd slept on the porch, terrified and cold. When she finally let me in the next morning, she'd acted like it was no big deal, like I'd deserved it. "Yes," I said again. "How did you know?" "Because abusive patterns tend to repeat," Sandra said softly. "What your mother did to Emma isn't new behavior. It's an escalation of behavior that's probably been there for a long time." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. I'd always told myself that Carol was just strict, that she believed in old-fashioned discipline, that it was normal. But it wasn't normal. It never had been. "What about your sister?" Sandra asked. "Diane was the favorite," I said quietly. "She never got punished the way I did. And sometimes she would join in. She'd tell Carol when I did something wrong. She'd make fun of me when I got in trouble. Once, she locked me in the garage and told me there were spiders everywhere. I was 8. I was terrified of spiders. She left me there for hours." Sandra nodded, still writing. "And your father? George never did anything. He just watched. Sometimes I'd beg him to help me, but he'd just shake his head and walk away. He always said Carol was in charge of discipline, and he didn't want to interfere. That's called passive enabling," Sandra explained. "He allowed the abuse to continue by refusing to intervene." The word abuse hit me like a slap. Was that what it was? Had I been abused? "Miss Morrison, I want you to understand something," Sandra said, her voice kind but firm. "What happened to Emma in the desert wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. Your mother has a history of using extreme and dangerous punishments. Your sister participated in tormenting you as a child, and now she's participating in tormenting Emma. Your father enabled it then, and he's enabling it now. This is a family system that's been dysfunctional for decades." Tears streamed down my face. "I didn't realize. I thought it was just how things were." "That's very common," Sandra assured me. "Children normalize what they grow up with. But now you're a mother, and you have the power to break the cycle. You're already doing that by protecting Emma." Over the next week, Sandra interviewed Carol, George, and Diane separately. She didn't tell me many details about those interviews. But she did say something that shook me. During my conversation with your sister, she admitted they left Emma alone for at least 2 hours. She called it character building. She didn't seem to think she'd done anything wrong. Sandra paused. That directly contradicts what your mother told me. Your mother is still claiming it was only 20 minutes. Their stories don't match, which is a major red flag. What happens now? I asked. I'm going to recommend supervised visitation only. Your parents and sister should not have unsupervised access to Emma until they complete parenting classes and undergo counseling. I'll submit my report to the court. The court. If your parents pursue grandparent visitation rights, yes. This report will be part of the record. I felt a wave of relief mixed with sadness. Relief that Emma would be protected. Sadness that it had come to this. Emma started seeing a therapist. Dr. Patel twice a week. After the 4th session, Dr. Patel asked to speak with me privately. Emma has shared some concerning things, Dr. Patel said. She's been anxious around your mother and sister for years. She says they constantly criticize her. Her weight, her clothes, her interests, her friends. She says your mother compares her to your sister's children and finds her lacking. Emma has been feeling judged and inadequate for a long time. The desert incident was a traumatic breaking point, but the foundation was already there. I felt sick. How had I not seen this? How had I not protected Emma from the same dynamics I'd experienced as a child? Don't blame yourself, Doctor, Patel said, as if reading my mind. You were conditioned to accept this treatment as normal. But now you know better. And you're doing better. That's what matters. I threw myself into protecting Emma and preparing for whatever legal battles lay ahead. Mark helped me find Angela Torres, a tough family law attorney with a reputation for winning difficult cases. Your parents don't have a strong case for custody, Angela assured me after reviewing everything. You're a fit parent with no history of neglect or abuse. They're the ones who endangered Emma. But they can definitely make your life difficult if they want to. We need to be prepared. I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew what to expect. Then my cousin Brian called. He was George's nephew, and had always been close to my parents. But his voice sounded strange when I answered. Terry, I need to tell you something, he said. I feel really guilty about this. What is it? Your mom has been meeting with Emma's school counselor. She's been telling the counselor that you're mentally unstable, that Emma would be better off living with her. She's been doing this for weeks, even before the desert thing happened. My blood ran cold. What? I overheard her talking to Diane about it. They've been planning this. They want custody of Emma. The desert incident didn't make them want custody. They already wanted it. I think they were trying to build a case that you're a bad mother. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't about teaching Emma a lesson. This wasn't even about defending their actions. They'd been planning to take Emma away from me even before the desert. The desert incident was just one more piece of ammunition in a larger strategy. Brian, why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong, he said quietly. I love Aunt Carol, but this is wrong. Emma belongs with you. You're a good mom. And what they did in the desert was horrible. I can't stay quiet anymore. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Angela immediately. They've been planning this, I told her, my voice shaking. They've been trying to make me look like an unfit mother for weeks, maybe months. Then we fight, Angela said firmly. We fight hard. Get me any documentation you can. Emails, texts, anything. We're going to show the court exactly who your parents are. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how calculated this all was, how my mother had been setting me up to lose my daughter, how she'd twisted everything to make herself look like the concerned grandmother, and me look like the problem. But I also felt something else. Determination, clarity, anger that burned clean and bright. They'd underestimated me. They thought I'd back down like I always had. They thought I'd choose peace over protecting Emma. They were wrong. I met with Angela Torres in her office downtown. She had a corner office with a view of the city, and her walls were covered with awards and certificates. She exuded confidence and competence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a real ally. Here is what we're going to do, Angela said, spreading files across her desk. First, We file a police report for child endangerment against your mother, father, and sister. Second, we petition the court for a restraining order to keep them away from Emma. Third, we prepare for them to fight back, because they will. What if I lose? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if they convince a judge that I'm unfit, and Emma should live with them? That's not going to happen, Angela said firmly. Look at what we have. Hospital records documenting Emma's heat stroke and dehydration. A doctor's statement saying she nearly died. A CPS report recommending supervised visitation only. Text messages from your sister showing zero remorse. And now we have your cousin's testimony about their custody plans. We have a strong case. But they have money, I said. They can afford better lawyers than I can. Money doesn't change facts, Angela replied. And the facts are on our side. Trust me, Terry. We're going to protect Emma. The next day, I went to the Phoenix Police Department and filed a formal report. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but matter-of-fact. He explained that the case would be reviewed by the prosecutor's office to determine if criminal charges would be filed. Even if they don't file charges, having this report on record is important, the officer told me. It establishes a documented pattern. Then Angela filed the petition for a restraining order. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. My phone exploded again. Carol left a voicemail so full of rage that I could barely understand half of it. The words I did catch were ungrateful, traitor, and you'll regret this. Diane sent a series of texts. You've crossed a line. We were trying to help Emma and you're destroying us. I hope you can live with yourself. George sent one short message. Terry, please. Let's talk about this. We're family. But it was too late for talking. They'd had their chance to apologize. They'd had their chance to take responsibility. Instead, they doubled down, lied, threatened, and tried to take my daughter. There was no going back now. The attacks on social media intensified. Diane posted more thinly veiled messages about false accusations and family betrayal. Some of my relatives commented with support for her, but I also started noticing something else. A few people were pushing back, asking questions, saying that abandoning a child in the desert seemed extreme no matter what the reason was. My Aunt Linda, Carol's younger sister, reached out privately. Terry, I need you to know something. Your mother has always been this way, controlling, harsh, unwilling to admit when she's wrong. I've been afraid to speak up because she cuts people off if they don't agree with her. But what she did to Emma was unforgivable. I'm proud of you for protecting your daughter. Her words meant everything. Finally, someone from the family who understood. Someone who validated what I'd been saying all along. The 2 weeks leading up to the court hearing were excruciating. I barely slept. I went over my testimony with Angela a dozen times. We prepared Emma too, gently explaining what might happen in court and what questions she might be asked. I don't want to see Grandma, Emma said quietly. Is that bad? Does that make me a terrible person? No, sweetheart, I assured her. You have every right to feel however you feel. Grandma hurt you. It's okay to not want to be around someone who hurt you. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. Angela, Emma, and I arrived at the courthouse early. My stomach was in knots. Mark met us there for moral support, even though he wasn't part of the case. You've got this, he said, squeezing my shoulder. Emma's going to be okay. You're doing the right thing. When we entered the courtroom, Carol, George, and Diane were already there with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. They didn't look at us. Carol sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of righteous indignation. Diane looked smug, like she thought this whole thing was a waste of time. George looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Reyes, called the hearing to order. Angela presented our case first. She laid out the timeline of events methodically. The desert trip, Emma's testimony about being left alone, the hospital records, Dr. Hassan's statement that Emma had been in life-threatening danger, the CPS report, the text messages showing no remorse. Your Honor, this wasn't discipline, Angela said. This was child endangerment. And the respondents have shown absolutely no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. They continue to blame the child and the petitioner. They are not safe people to have unsupervised access to this minor. Then it was the other lawyer's turn. He argued that this was all a misunderstanding, that Carol and George were loving grandparents who had made an error in judgment but meant no harm, that Terry was overreacting and using the courts to punish her family for personal grievances. The evidence shows that the child was left alone for a brief period, not the hours being claimed, he said smoothly. There's no proof of intent to harm. This is a family matter that should be resolved privately, not through restraining orders. Judge Reyes listened to both sides without expression. Then she asked to hear from Emma. Emma took the stand, her voice small and shaky at first. But as she told her story, she grew steadier. She described the heat, the dizziness, the fear. She described sitting on that rock, waiting and waiting for them to come back. She described thinking she was going to die. How did you feel when your grandmother and aunt drove away? Angela asked gently. Confused. Emma said, and scared. I didn't understand why they were leaving me. I kept thinking I must have done something really bad, but I just didn't feel good. I just wanted to go home. Have you wanted to see your grandmother or aunt since this happened? Emma shook her head. No, I'm afraid of them. Carol made a small sound of protest, but Judge Reyes silenced her with a look. The other lawyer tried to cross-examine Emma, but Judge Reyes was protective. She didn't allow him to badger or confuse her. Emma answered his questions honestly and simply. Then Carol took the stand. And that's when everything fell apart for them. Carol repeated her story about only leaving Emma for 20 minutes, about Emma being in the shade, about this all being blown out of proportion. But Angela was ready. Miss Morrison, you've stated multiple times that you only left Emma alone for 20 minutes. Is that correct? Yes, Carol said firmly. But your daughter Diane gave a different timeline to Child Protective Services. She said it was at least 2 hours. Which is it? Carol hesitated. Well, it might have been longer. I don't exactly remember. But it wasn't that long. So you're changing your testimony. I'm clarifying. Angela pressed on. You also stated Emma was in the shade, but the park ranger who found her reported she was in full sun. Are you saying the ranger is lying? I'm saying Emma probably moved after we left, Carol snapped. So it's Emma's fault she got heat stroke. I didn't say that. Then whose fault is it? Carol's composure started to crack. It was an accident. A misunderstanding. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. But you did mean to leave her alone in the desert. We meant to teach her a lesson. By leaving her in 115-degree heat with no water. It wasn't that hot where we left her. Angela pulled out weather records. According to the National Weather Service, the temperature in that area at that time was between 112 and 118 degrees. There is no spot in that desert where it wasn't dangerously hot. Carol's face flushed. I don't have to sit here and be interrogated like a criminal. You endangered a child's life, Angela said flatly. That is criminal. Then Diane took the stand. And that's when things really exploded. Diane was defensive from the start. She repeated the same talking points. Emma was dramatic. Terry was overreacting. They were trying to help. But when Angela pressed her on details, Diane's temper flared. Your sister claims you were only gone for 20 or 30 minutes, Angela said. Is that accurate? I don't know. I wasn't watching the clock. But earlier you told CPS it was at least 2 hours. I might have exaggerated. So you lied to CPS. I didn't lie. I just wasn't sure. But you are sure that leaving Emma alone was the right thing to do? Yes, Diane said defiantly. She needed to learn that actions have consequences. What actions? Angela asked. What did Emma do that warranted being abandoned in life-threatening conditions? She was being bratty. She was complaining. She was ruining the trip for everyone. So complaining deserves potential death. She wasn't going to die. Stop being so dramatic. Angela held up Dr. Hassan's report. The doctor who treated Emma stated that she was within an hour of organ failure. Do you dispute that? Doctors always exaggerate to cover themselves. The judge leaned forward. Miss Lopez, I would advise you to be respectful of medical professionals in my courtroom. Diane barely seemed to hear her. She was fixated on Angela, her face red with anger. This whole thing is ridiculous. Emma is fine. She's sitting right there. And we're being dragged through court like criminals because Terry can't let go of her grudges against our mother. This isn't about grudges, Angela said. This is about protecting a child from people who have demonstrated dangerous judgment and zero remorse. We have nothing to be remorseful about, Diane exploded. We were trying to raise Emma right because Terry is too weak to do it herself. Emma is spoiled and entitled, and someone needed to teach her reality. We did nothing wrong. And then she turned and looked directly at Emma in the gallery. This is all your fault, you spoiled little liar. You ruined everything. The courtroom went silent. Judge Reyes' expression turned to stone. Miss Lopez, you will not address the minor, the judge said coldly. But Diane wasn't done. She kept going, her voice rising. She's lying about everything. She probably walked into the desert on purpose to make us look bad. She's manipulative, just like her mother. They're both liars and they're destroying this family. Miss Lopez, Judge Reyes' voice cracked like a whip. Sit down, now. George finally spoke up from his seat, his voice weak. Diane, stop, please. But trying to defend Diane, George made everything worse. Your Honor, I think my daughter is just upset. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. Maybe leaving Emma wasn't the best idea. Maybe we made a mistake, but we're not bad people. The judge looked at him sharply. You admit it was a mistake to leave a 16-year-old in the desert in extreme heat with no water. George looked trapped. I mean, in hindsight, maybe we should have handled it differently. In hindsight, Judge Reyes repeated. Mr. Morrison, your granddaughter nearly died. This isn't a matter of hindsight. This is a matter of basic human decency and legal responsibility. Their lawyer tried to do damage control, but it was too late. Diane had lost her temper in front of the judge and yelled at Emma. George had admitted fault while trying to defend his actions. Carol had contradicted herself multiple times and shown no genuine remorse. Judge Reyes reviewed the evidence, made some notes, and then delivered her ruling. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I find that the minor Emma Morrison was placed in immediate danger by the respondents. The respondents have failed to demonstrate genuine remorse or understanding of the severity of their actions. Their testimony has been inconsistent and, at times, contradictory. Most concerning, the respondents continue to blame the child for their own choices. She paused and looked directly at Carol, George, and Diane. This court finds sufficient grounds to issue a restraining order. Carol Morrison, George Morrison, and Diane Lopez are hereby prohibited from any contact with Emma Morrison for a period of 1 year. This includes in-person contact, phone calls, texts, emails, social media contact, and third-party contact. Any violation of this order will result in immediate legal consequences. I felt Emma sag with relief beside me. It was over. Wed won, but Judge Reyes wasn't finished. I am also recommending that the prosecutor's office review this case for potential criminal charges. What happened here was not discipline. It was reckless endangerment. This family needs to understand that children are not property to be controlled through fear and punishment. They are human beings who deserve safety and respect. Carol stood up, her face white with shock and rage. This is outrageous. We're the victims here. Our own family has betrayed us. Sit down, Miss Morrison, Judge Reyes said firmly. This hearing is concluded. We left the courtroom in a daze. Emma clung to my hand. Mark walked on my other side. Angela was already on her phone, documenting everything. You did it, Mark said quietly. You protected her. I looked down at Emma, at her face finally relaxing for the first time in weeks. We did it together. As we walked out of the courthouse into the Phoenix sunshine, I saw Carol, George, and Diane getting into their car. They didn't look at us. Diane was crying. Carol was rigid with fury. George just looked defeated. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, vindication, sadness. But mostly, I felt free. Free from their control. Free from their judgment. Free from the cycle of abuse that had defined my childhood. Emma was safe. That was all that mattered. The months following the restraining order were both liberating and painful. Word spread quickly through our extended family and my mother's church community. The story got out, not in the sanitized version Carol had been spreading, but in the truth. Emma had nearly died. Her grandmother, grandfather, and aunt had left her in the desert. The court had issued a restraining order. The reactions were mixed. Some relatives doubled down on supporting Carol and Diane. They insisted this was all a misunderstanding and that I was destroying the family. My cousin Rachel sent me a long email about how forgiveness was more important than grudges, completely missing the point that this wasn't about grudges at all. But others started reaching out with private apologies. My Aunt Linda became one of my strongest supporters, checking in on Emma regularly and inviting us over for dinner. My Uncle Tom called to say he'd always thought Carol was too harsh and he was sorry he'd never said anything. Even a few people from church sent cards or messages saying they were praying for Emma's healing. The most surprising change came from Diane's husband, Kyle. 2 months after the court hearing, word got around that Kyle had filed for separation. Through mutual friends, I heard that Kyle had been horrified by what Diane did in the desert, and even more horrified by how Shed acted since. Her refusal to take any responsibility, her attacks on Emma, her complete lack of remorse, had made him see a side of his wife he couldn't accept. Diane, predictably, blamed me for her marriage falling apart. She posted on social media about how lies and false accusations had destroyed her family. But by then, most people knew the truth. Her posts got fewer and fewer supportive comments. Some people even started pushing back in the comments, pointing out that abandoning a child in dangerous conditions wasn't okay, no matter how you framed it. Carol and George became increasingly isolated. Their social circles shrank. People stopped inviting them to gatherings. Their church, after learning the full story, quietly suggested they find another congregation. Carol was devastated. Shed built her entire identity around being a respected church member and community figure. Losing that status broke something in her. George sent me an email about 4 months after the hearing. It was short and awkward. "Terry, I wish things had gone differently. I never wanted any of this to happen. I hope you and Emma are doing well, George." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an acknowledgement of what Head done. It was just a weak expression of regret that things hadn't worked out the way Head wanted. I didn't respond. Emma continued therapy with Dr. Patel. Slowly, she started healing. The nightmares about the desert became less frequent. Her anxiety eased. She laughed more. She focused on school and her friends. She joined the drama club and discovered she loved acting. Mark and I developed a stronger co-parenting relationship. He started coming to Emma's therapy sessions when Dr. Patel suggested family involvement would help. The three of us had dinners together regularly. We weren't getting back together, but we were building something healthier. A real partnership in raising our daughter. I started therapy too, working with a counselor named Beth who specialized in family trauma. For the first time in my life, I started unpacking what my childhood had really been like. The punishment, the control, the favoritism toward Diane. The way it'd been made to feel like I was always wrong, always too sensitive, always the problem. "You were abused," Beth said matter-of-factly during one session. "Your mother's behavior fits the pattern of emotional and physical abuse. You've been conditioned to minimize it, but that doesn't make it less real." Hearing those words validated something I'd been afraid to name. I grieved for the little girl I'd been. The one who'd tried so hard to be good enough for a mother who would never be satisfied, and I felt grateful that Emma would never have to go through that. 6 months after the hearing, I received a letter in the mail. It was addressed in handwriting I recognized. George's. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long. My hands shook as I read it. "Dear Terry, I know I don't have the right to write to you. I know you have every reason to throw this letter away without reading it, but I need to say some things. Even if you never respond, I was wrong. What we did to Emma was wrong. I've been telling myself for months that it was just a mistake, that we didn't mean to hurt her, that it got blown out of proportion. But the truth is simpler and harder than that. We nearly killed her, and instead of apologizing and making it right, we attacked you. We tried to take Emma away from you. We made ourselves into victims when we were the ones who caused harm. I've been a coward my entire life. I let your mother control everything. I watched her punish you harshly when you were growing up and I said nothing. I watched Diane join in tormenting you and I did nothing. When Carol wanted to leave Emma in the desert, I should have said no. I should have protected my granddaughter. Instead, I followed Carol to the car and drove away. I've left Carol. We're separated now. I can't live with her anymore. I can't watch her twist reality and refuse to take responsibility and attack anyone who doesn't agree with her. I should have left decades ago. I should have protected you when you were a child. I didn't. And I will have to live with that failure for the rest of my life. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I'm not asking to see Emma. I understand why she doesn't want to see me. I'm not even asking for a response from you. I just wanted you to know the truth. You were right. I was wrong. Emma deserved better. You deserved better. I'm sorry. George, I read the letter twice, then set it down on the table. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of validation, of something that felt almost like closure. George had finally told the truth, had finally taken responsibility. It didn't undo the harm, it didn't erase the past, but it meant something. It meant I hadn't been crazy. I hadn't been overreacting. It'd been right all along. I showed the letter to Emma that evening. She read it quietly, her expression unreadable. Do you want to see him? I asked gently. You don't have to. But if you do, we could arrange something supervised. It would be your choice. Emma thought for a long moment. Not yet, she said finally. Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm still working through a lot. That's completely okay, I assured her. There's no rush. You get to decide what's right for you. 2 weeks later, after talking it over with Dr. Patel and Beth, Emma and I agreed to meet George for coffee at a neutral location. Just once, just to hear what he had to say in person. We met at a small cafe in Scottsdale on a Saturday morning. George was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table. He looked different, older, thinner, less sure of himself. He stood when he saw us, his hands twisting together nervously. Terry, Emma, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. We sat down. The silence was heavy and awkward. Finally, George spoke. Emma, I owe you an apology, a real one. What I did to you in the desert was unforgivable. I left you in danger. I failed to protect you. And then, instead of making it right, I let your grandmother and aunt attack your mother. I let them try to take you away from the one person who was actually protecting you. I was a coward. I'm ashamed of who I've been. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Why did you leave me there? I don't have a good answer, George admitted. Your grandmother said it would teach you resilience. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to stand up to her. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I've spent my whole life not standing up to her. And it's cost me everything. It cost me my relationship with your mother when she was growing up. And it cost me my relationship with you. I was so scared, Emma whispered. I know. And am so sorry. George's voice broke. You deserved a grandfather who protected you. Instead, you got me. Someone who failed you in the worst possible way. We sat there for almost an hour. George didn't make excuses. He didn't try to explain away what had happened. He just listened when Emma told him how Shed felt, how scared Shed been, how hurt she still was. He answered her questions honestly. He took full responsibility. At the end, Emma looked at him with tear-stained cheeks. I'm not ready to have you in my life yet. I don't know if I ever will be, but I appreciate that you told the truth. That matters. George nodded, his own eyes wet. That's more than fair. More than I deserve. Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize face to face. I'll respect whatever boundaries you need. We left the cafe together, Emma and I. She leaned against me as we walked to the car. How do you feel? I asked. Sad, Emma said. But also, lighter? Does that make sense? Perfect sense, I assured her. That night, I filed George's letter away in a folder with all the other documents from this nightmare. The hospital records, the CPS reports, the court documents, the restraining order. And now, a letter of genuine apology and accountability. I didn't know if I'd ever fully forgive George. I didn't know if Emma would ever want a relationship with him. But I did know one thing. Wed survived. Wed protected each other. Wed broken the cycle. And that was enough. 1 year after the desert incident, Emma's 17th birthday arrived. We celebrated with Jade, Mark, Aunt Linda, and a handful of Emma's closest friends. We had cake and pizza, and watched Emma open presents. It was simple and joyful, and exactly what Emma wanted. As I watched Emma laugh with her friends, I marveled at how far she'd come. The anxious, traumatized girl from the hospital had transformed into a confident young woman. Shed made honor roll at school. Shed landed the lead in the spring musical. Shed started talking about colleges and future plans. She was thriving. The restraining order had expired a few months earlier, but Emma and I had maintained our boundaries. Carol had made a few attempts to reach out. Shed sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, which we returned unopened with a note explaining that Emma wasn't ready for contact. Carol never apologized, never took responsibility, never acknowledged the harm Shed caused. She just expected everything to go back to normal because enough time had passed. Diane had stopped trying to contact us altogether. According to Aunt Linda, Diane had moved to California after her divorce was finalized. Shed started over somewhere new, still insisting Shed done nothing wrong, still playing the victim. George kept his distance like Head promised. He sent occasional letters, always respectful, always taking accountability, never asking for more than Emma was willing to give. Emma had met with him twice more over the course of the year, always in supervised settings, always on her terms. Their relationship was fragile and uncertain, but there was at least honesty now, at least truth. I'd built a new life for myself, too. I'd started setting boundaries in all areas of my life, not just with my family of origin. I'd learned to prioritize my own well-being and Emma's well-being above keeping the peace. I'd surrounded myself with people who respected those boundaries. Jade, Mark, Aunt Linda, my therapist, Beth, a few new friends I'd made through Emma's school activities. Most importantly, I'd given Emma something I never had growing up, a mother who chose her child over toxic family loyalty, a mother who said no to abuse and yes to safety, a mother who broke the cycle. One evening, about 3 weeks after Emma's birthday, she and I were sitting on our back porch watching the sunset. The Arizona sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. It was peaceful, beautiful, safe. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "I've been thinking about everything that happened. The desert, the court case, all of it." "Yeah," I waited, giving her space to gather her thoughts. I used to think it was my fault. Like if I'd just pushed through and finished the hike, none of this would have happened. Grandma and Aunt Diane wouldn't have left me. Our family wouldn't have fallen apart. It would all still be normal. My heart ached. Emma. But Dr. Patel helped me understand something. It was never normal. The way Grandma treated me, the way she criticized everything I did, the way she compared me to other people and made me feel like I was never good enough. That wasn't normal. That was toxic. And what she did in the desert wasn't discipline. It was abuse. I reached over and took Emma's hand. "And the thing is," Emma continued, "you saved me. Not just from the desert. From all of it. You could have chosen them. You could have told me to get over it and keep the peace and pretend everything was fine. But you didn't. You chose me. Even when it cost you your whole family. Even when everyone turned against you. You chose me." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "Every single time. Emma, I'll choose you every single time. I know," Emma said, squeezing my hand. "And that's made all the difference. I used to think family meant you had to accept whatever treatment people gave you just because you were related. But you taught me something better. You taught me that real family is about respect and safety and love. Not control and fear and obligation. You're wise beyond your years," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I learned from the best." Emma replied with a small smile. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon. Then Emma spoke again. "Are you glad you did it? Are you glad you fought back and got the restraining order and everything? Even though it meant losing your mom and sister and most of your relatives." I thought about her question, really thought about it. A year ago, I would have been torn. A year ago, I might have wondered if Id overreacted. But now I knew the answer with absolute certainty. Yes, I said firmly. I'm glad. Because I didn't lose anything that was actually good for us. I lost people who were hurting us. And what I gained was so much more valuable. I gained clarity. I gained healthy boundaries. I gained real relationships with people who actually care about us. And most importantly, I gained the knowledge that I could protect you when it mattered most. I wouldn't change a thing. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you, Mom, for everything. Over the next few months, Emma and I started planning a road trip for the summer. We wanted to visit national parks, see different parts of the country, make new memories. This time it would be on our terms, with people who loved us, with safety and respect and joy. We invited Mark, and he said yes immediately. We invited Jade, who cleared her schedule. Aunt Linda asked if she could join for part of the trip, and we happily agreed. We planned routes and made reservations and talked about all the places we wanted to see. One evening, while we were looking at maps spread across the dining room table, Emma said something that brought everything full circle. You know what's funny? Grandma said leaving me in the desert would teach me about resilience. But the real lesson about resilience came from watching you. Watching you stand up to everyone. Watching you protect me even when it was hard. Watching you build a new life when the old one fell apart. That's real resilience, not enduring abuse, but walking away from it and creating something better. Her words struck me deeply. She was right. Resilience wasn't about tolerating mistreatment. It wasn't about suffering in silence. It wasn't about keeping the peace at any cost. Real resilience was about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, protecting the people you love, building healthy relationships, walking away from toxicity even when it's hard. Choosing healing over history, that was the lesson I'd learned. That was the lesson Id taught Emma. And that was the lesson I hoped others might learn from our story. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up with love and respect. It's defined by who protects you when you're vulnerable. It's defined by who takes responsibility for their mistakes and does better. Id spent most of my life trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to be good enough, trying to fit into a family system that was fundamentally broken. But Id finally learned that I couldn't fix people who didn't want to be fixed. I couldn't force people to see their own toxicity. I couldn't make people love me the way I deserved to be loved. What I could do was protect my daughter, set boundaries, build a chosen family of people who actually valued us, and break the generational cycle of abuse so Emma would never repeat these patterns with her own children someday. That was power. That was freedom. That was love in its truest form. A few weeks before our road trip, Emma came to me with an idea. She'd been working on something in therapy with Dr. Patel. A letter. Not to send, but to process her feelings. Dr. Patel suggested I write a letter to Grandma Carol, saying everything I wish I could say to her. We've been working on it for weeks. I finished it today. Do you want to read it? I read Emma's letter with tears streaming down my face. She'd written about the fear she felt in the desert, the betrayal when they drove away, the confusion about why her own grandmother would hurt her like that, the anger at being blamed for her own near-death experience, the grief over losing grandparents she'd once loved, and finally, the acceptance that some relationships can't be saved and that's okay. The letter ended with words that took my breath away. I forgive you, Grandma. Not because you've earned it or because you've apologized. You haven't. I forgive you because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean I'll ever let you back into my life. It just means I'm choosing peace over bitterness. I'm choosing to move forward without you. I'm choosing the family that actually loves me. Goodbye. Emma, this is beautiful, I said, my voice choked with emotion. You've done such important work. I learned from you, Emma said simply. You showed me that it's okay to walk away. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect yourself and the people you love. Even from family. As summer approached and our road trip drew closer, I found myself reflecting on everything we'd been through. The trauma, the betrayal, the court battles, the isolation, the healing, the growth. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd lose most of my family of origin, I would have been devastated. But now? Now I understood that I hadn't lost anything real. It'd shed dead weight. It removed toxic people from our lives. It made space for healthy relationships to grow. Emma and I were closer than ever. Mark and I were better co-parents than we'd ever been married. I had friends who actually showed up for me. I had boundaries that I enforced without guilt. I had clarity about what I wanted and what I wouldn't tolerate. Most importantly, I had broken a cycle. Emma would never grow up thinking abuse was normal. She would never grow up thinking she had to earn love through obedience. She would never grow up believing that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment. She would grow up knowing that real love looks like respect and safety and support. She would grow up with healthy boundaries and self-worth. She would grow up understanding that walking away from toxicity isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. That was my gift to her. That was how it changed our family's story. The evening before our road trip, Emma and I sat on that same back porch where we'd had so many important conversations over the past year. The Arizona summer air was warm, but not unbearable. The stars were starting to appear in the darkening sky. "Mom," Emma said. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me. Every single time. When everyone else said I was the problem, you believed me. When everyone said you were overreacting, you kept protecting me anyway. When your whole family turned against you, you didn't back down. You chose me." I pulled Emma close. "Always, baby. From the moment you were born, you've been my priority. Nothing will ever change that." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Emma. So much." We sat there in the gathering darkness, mother and daughter, survivors and fighters, ready for whatever came next. The past year had been the hardest of my life, but it had also been the most important. It had taught me who I really was. It had shown me what I was capable of. It had given me and Emma a future free from the toxicity that had defined generations of our family. As I sat there with my daughter's head on my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Deep, genuine peace. Not the false peace that comes from avoiding conflict or keeping toxic people happy. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when it was hard. The kind that comes from protecting the people you love. The kind that comes from breaking free. I'd spent my whole life afraid of losing my family's approval. But in the end, the only approval that mattered was my own. And Emma's. We'd survived. We'd healed. We'd built something better, and that was more than enough. That was everything. The next morning, we packed the car for our road trip. Mark arrived with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Jade showed up with a playlist shed made for the drive. We loaded bags and snacks and maps. Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. As we pulled out of the driveway, Emma turned to me with the biggest smile I'd seen in months. "This is going to be the best summer ever." "Yes," I agreed, smiling back at her. "Yes, it is." And as we drove away toward new adventures, new memories, and new beginnings, I knew we were going to be okay. More than okay. We were going to be happy, free, strong. We'd survived the desert, both literal and metaphorical. And we'd come out the other side better, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. That was my story, that was Emma's story, that was our story. And it was just the beginning. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace with toxic family members and protecting someone you love? It's one of the hardest decisions anyone can face. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's facing a similar choice. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like. Subscribe to hear more stories about courage, boundaries, and breaking free from toxic patterns. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you something to think about. Maybe it reminded you that you're stronger than you think. Maybe it showed you that protecting yourself and the people you love isn't selfish. It's necessary. Whatever situation you're facing, I hope you find the courage to choose healing over history, boundaries over obligation, and peace over false harmony. Take care of yourselves. You deserve safety, respect, and love. Never forget that.